Ex- Except for a walk with one of his friends, Meherwan spent more and more of his time alone in his tiny attic room, cooped up in the dark, aloof and uncommunicative with his family. Once, however, he left the house without saying where he was going and went to the village of Kondwa outside of Pune, beyond the Zoroastrian Tower of Silence. There he lay motionless like a corpse under a tree for 3 days and nights, without food or water. The family, thinking he had become lost in the city, was extremely relieved when Meherwan reunited. Having exhausted all available means to return their son to normality, Meherwan's parents decided that a change of environment might help and send him to Bombay for a few months to stay with his mother, Jamshed, who was working as a clerk in Bombay municipality office. Jamshed had rented a room opposite the zoo at Victoria Gardens in the Baikala area. In the letters home, Jamshed would often complain of feeling lonely and isolated in Bombay. So he welcomed Meherwan and watched carefully over him. When Jamshed went to the office, Meherwan would go to the seashore at Chapati Beach early each morning, where he would sit for several hours and watch the waves roll in and recede, usually until the afternoon. Then Meherwan would walk back to Victoria Gardens and again sit for hours. He would sit on one particular bench in an isolated area of public gardens and again sit for hours. He would sit in one particular bench in an isolated area of the public gardens away from the other benches and pedestrians. He would remain there alone until evening, when Jamshed would arrive and accompany him back to the room. As mentioned, Meherwan's aunt and uncle, Banu Masi and Khodad Masa, were living in Bombay at this time with their family. Before starting his work in his Before starting his work in his tea shop, Khodad Masa would come to Victoria Gardens to see Meherwan. Holding Meherwan's hand, he would place it on his own head in blessing as an auspicious way to begin the day. Such was the love and respect Khodad had for his nephew. He said
Hodadad. Hodadad.
Khodadad had for his nephew. He sensed that he was not an ordinary young man. For some weeks, Meherwan followed this routine every day and undisturbed. One day, however, his favorite bench in the gardens was occupied by a Parsi family. Meherwan started nervously walking back and forth. He strode swiftly up to the people on the bench, turned around abruptly, and walked quickly in the opposite direction. Then again strode up to them and suddenly turned around when he got near. Next page.
Ready?
The fact that Meherwan never blinked made the Parsi man think that the young man was staring at his daughter. The family did not leave the bench, and when Merwan walked again in front of them, the father got up angrily, grabbed hold of Merwan, and slapped him across the face. But Merwan was obvious,
Oblivious.
oblivious to what was happening and unconscious of his own physical body. So the slap had no effect on him. He did not react to the man's affront, but continued as before, walking swiftly back and forth in front of the bench, staring straight ahead. The man could not stand it any longer, and thinking the young man to be unbalanced, finally left with his wife and daughter immediately. Merwan headed straight for the empty bench and settled himself in his usual manner until Jamshed arrived that evening to escort him to his room. When Merwan returned to Pune in November of 1914, he became somewhat normal and started recognizing people and places around him. Yet his mind would not concentrate on anything or premeditate any action through his eyelids started to open and close as his vacant stare gradually disappeared. When this change was noticed, Mehran's family was greatly relieved and thought that he had been given a new chance in life. Mehran started eating again, but in very small quantities, feeding what remained on his plate to the dogs. Memo would constantly reprimand him about feeding stray animals, but he continued behind her back.
I want to
For a long
ask a question. I want to ask a question. Is it all right?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it says that can you page the up first? Yeah, it says that November 1914 he started recognizing and eating and all that. How long was that since he got the kids? Since he lost, since he was completely God realized?
It was about 10
About
months or
10
almost,
months?
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I think
Thank you.
9 months, they say in the books. So,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
okay, Mona,
for a
go
long
ahead. Right here.
for a long time, Memo thought Merwan was eating all his food. She had no idea what he would take it. No, sorry.
That.
Yeah, she had no idea that he would take it to his room and hide it in his dresser drawer, a cupboard, or behind the furniture, returning the plate empty. One day, while Merwan was staying in Bombay with his brother Jamshed, Memo smelled something foul in the attic. She looked in every corner but could find nothing. Finally, passing through Merwan's room, she smelled the odor even stronger and opened a small trunk by his bed. She was repulsed to find it full of decaying food and maggots. Merwan had neglected to dispose of the food before leaving and simply left it rotting in the trunk. Until then, Memo had reluctantly agreed to allow Merwan to prepare his own breakfast in his room and eat his meals there. However, from that day onward, she watched him, making certain he took no food to his room and insisting that he sit at the dining table for his meals. Despite her vigilance, Merwan still somehow managed to eat very little and gave the rest to the dogs. Merwan continued to visit Jamshed in Bombay, going with Bailey most weekends. They would board the afternoon train from Pune on Saturday and reach Bombay at 7 p.m. Jamshed would meet them at Baikala railway station. Together in Jamshed's company, Bailey recalled, we would reach his room, relax a while from the journey's exhaustion, freshen up, and go to hotel, restaurant to have some food. At times, we would attend plays or watch silent cinema shows. Sometimes, we would travel visiting various places by tram or train, spending our time sightseeing and return late at night. The next day, being a Sunday, Jamshed's day off from work, we three would enjoy the whole day till late in the night. Catching the night train the same day, we would reach home early the next morning. One day, Mehrwan announced he wanted to visit important Zoroastrian places of pilgrimage in Gujarat. He decided to go with his brother Jamshed and four of his friends, Bailey, Khodu, Bhairamji, and Latus. Merwan and his five companions set out from Pune to pay their respects. First, at the oldest fire temple in India, at Udvada, like Banaras to Hindus and Mecca to Muslims. Udvada is the holiest place of pilgrimage to Zoroastrians in India. It was in Udvada over 1,200 years ago that the first Zoroastrian immigrants from Persia settled. Prophet Zoroaster is believed to have started a sacred fire in Persia over 7,000 years ago and to have established the worship of fire, which all Zoroastrians practice. The first Zoroastrians to emigrate to India brought with them the sacred fire and built a temple in Udvada to house it, guarded by the temple priests. It was never to be extinguished.
And the footnote says the flames in fire temples all over India are segments of this original fire brought to Udwada.
Can you please close the second window that you have because there are screeches in the sound, Mona?
Yeah, sure.
And I love the way you read. You read very, very beautiful.
So I'm sorry, but I'm reading through my laptop and it's recording on that, and you can hear me through my phone, so you'll have to bear with me. Yeah.
Okay.
Prior to the beginning, the journey, Merwan laid out certain conditions. No one was made, no one was to imbibe any alcoholic drinks except beer and toddy, an inexpensive fermented drink from the toddy palm. Only vegetarian food was to be taken. Consumption of meat, chicken, and fish was forbidden. Lastly, no one was to use any foul language or swear words and not allow any low thoughts to enter their mind. Even in those days, Merwan's friends respected him so much that they instinctively obeyed him and did exactly as he said. And since Merwan had taken responsibility for the journey by prepaying for everyone's fare and expenses, they were to reimburse him afterwards. They felt honor bound to comply with his wishes and promised to abide by them. The group spent 3 days at Udwada, and each morning Merwan led the young men to the fire temple for prayers. Afterward, they would sit under the shade of the palm trees or walk along the sandy beach. On the first day, when it was meal time, Merwan's friends sat around a table while he, as a sign of respect for their devout journey, sat on the floor and ate only potatoes and chapatis. All five friends were impressed by Mirwan's pious demeanor. The afternoons were quite warm, and once, after finishing their lunch, the group decided to rest in their room. As they were about to leave, Merwan suddenly began singing a song in Persian with deep fervor. His singing was so beautiful that it captivated their attention and they forgot about their intended naps. The sweetness of Merwan's voice brought other guests out of their rooms. Everyone enjoyed, sorry, everyone enjoyed Merwan's singing so much that they requested that he sing another and another. And he continued singing ghazal after ghazal. Some were commonly known, while others were his own compositions, composed extemporaneously. An elderly gentleman was so affected that he complimented Merwan as he patted him on the back. The glow on your face while you sang, and the ghazals you yourself composed to the glory of God, led me to believe that someday you will be a great man whose name will be known throughout the world. Next page, please.
Okay, thank you, Mona. I'll take over now. The audience applauded in agreement, but Merwan appeared shy and kept his eyes lowered. This was not the first occasion Merwan had caught the attention of the other hotel guests. At the fire temple or at the hotel, people could not resist looking at him. The glow on his face was so bright and so magnetic that all noticed him and wondered who he was. The days at Udwada were pleasant, and each of the young men enjoyed himself to his heart's content. The boys played music together and sang and danced. From Udwada, the group traveled by train to Navsari, Surat, and Broach along the western coast, staying for 2 days in each town. In Navsari and elsewhere, they stayed at the Parsi Dharamshala rest house and paid their respects at the fire temple. In spite of Merwan's prohibition, Bailey soon entreated Merwan to allow him to have some whiskey. Merwan refused to compromise, despite several requests by Bailey. Thereupon, Bailey became fed up and threatened to leave for Pune, requesting that Merwan give him the return fare. Merwan was disgusted with his friend's behavior and decided that all should return home immediately. The whole group, accordingly, returned to Bombay, where they stayed at a Parsi rest house called Pandey's Dharamshala. In the afternoon, Bailey found Merwan outside, sitting statue-like on a bench, without the slightest movement of either his limbs or eyelids. Bailey was amazed by Merwan's peculiar appearance and called Kodu and Latus. Latus made a light remark about it, but Kodu went up to Merwan and said something to try to make him snap out of it. When his words had no effect, Kodu gently touched Merwan, who was startled and appeared to awaken as if from a deep trance. Soon after, brought Merwan out of his strange state. Soon after Kodu brought Merwan out of his strange state, Merwan wanted to have a contest. Each fellow had to stare into the other's eyes, and the first to look away was the loser. Although each one looked into Merwan's eyes, no one could defeat him. At this time, Merwan's friends had no idea that he was God conscious, absorbed in a divine state of Aham Brahmasmi. Bailey was particularly perplexed, for it was the first time he had ever seen his lifelong friend totally oblivious to everything around him. Jamshed commented that he was well aware of his brother's peculiar behavior, since they had stayed together in Bombay in one room for over 3 months. After this, however, Bailey often observed Marwan sitting as motionless as a mannequin for hours, either staring intently at the light of a kerosene lamp or into the rays of the sun itself. Although he could at times function in the world, making arrangements, traveling, and talking with friends, Marwan had not yet returned to gross consciousness. In Bombay, Bailey apologized for his earlier rudeness and requested that Merwan arrange another outing so their trip could continue. The others supported Bailey, and Merwan decided to visit the Garapuri Caves on Elephanta Island, 3 miles across from Bombay Port in the Arabian Sea. They hired a boat to take them there and had an enjoyable day picnicking among the Hindu temples. They rambled together throughout the city of Bombay for 2 days more, going to plays, a silent film, and restaurants. One night, returning from the theater at 3 a.m., everyone was tired and anxious to go to sleep, except for Marwan, who asked Kodu to sing a song. Kodu launched into the first line in a loud, melodious voice. I will be your slave if you pack up your bedding from the world, meaning to renounce the material world. Kodu had hardly finished the first line when Merwan sat up in his bed and quipped, Brother, leave aside packing your bedding from the world. We'll all have to pack up from here if you continue warbling like that. Merwan's humorous remark was true. Other hotel lodgers had been disturbed by Kodu's outburst and had gone to the manager, rousing him from his sleep. The man came to their room to scold the group, but by the time he arrived, they were all in bed pretending to be snoring, so there was nothing he could do about the ruckus. The next day, Bailey had an argument with Kodu, again over hard liquor. Merwan had allowed Bailey and any others who wished to have a few drinks, but Kodu did not think he should be given any special treatment. Bailey became angry with the whole group and was so mad that, in a fit of temper, he left on a train to Pune. The following morning, much to Bailey's surprise, Jamshed appeared at Bailey's house. Jamshed explained that after Bailey left, Merwan had decided to return to Pune also, and had sent him to bring Bailey to him. Although Bailey's hot temper had been responsible for the abrupt end to the trip, Merwan had such a loving nature that he had sent for Bailey in order to forgive him, so there would be no bitter feelings. Bailey was touched by Merwan's loving consideration. Karamji, one of the friends who had accompanied the group to Udwara and beyond, had suffered from severely defective eyesight. 7 years earlier, his maternal uncle, Espandiar Rustam Irani, had brought him for medical treatment to Pune, where he had been cured. Behramji was introduced to Merwan by Kodu in 1914. He felt drawn to Merwan and became a regular visitor at Merwan's house. Behramji was 22 years old then, but was still illiterate. However, he had a sharp mind and was successful in the liquor business. To the delight of Merwan's parents, who thought he was returning to his normal self, in December of 1914, Merwan started teaching Behramji to read and write in Persian. Seeing her son engaging in social activities and appearing normal, Memo would urge him, Merag, get a good job. I know you have been upset about something all these months, but if you engage in a steady job or profession, you will become your old self again. How easy. Merwan would not agree, so Memo rented a room for him and suggested he offer tutoring services to other Irani lads like Behramji, who might also be interested in learning Persian. But this too Merwan refused to do. Memo then threatened to stop Behramji from visiting the house. Indifferently, Merwan consented, all right, do it if you like. At his lack of concern, Memo could only throw up her hands in exasperation, wondering what had happened to the son she had always referred to unabashedly as her most beautiful child. Merwan instructed Baramji to come to his room every day to be tutored in Persian, and nothing made Baramji happier than these daily visits. Baramji would not even let his business affairs interfere. Due entirely to Merwan's efforts, within 4 months, Baramji went from being completely illiterate to reading the poetry of Hafez. Gradually, Merwan also began conversing with Baramji about God, the inner path, the need for a guru, and other spiritual issues. Baramji was deeply interested and respected Merwan's views about spiritual matters. The two became close and would leave Pune together, visiting different places for several days at a time without informing anyone. On their return, when asked where they had been, Merwan would reply, on a pilgrimage in search of saints. In April 1915, Merwan told Baramji, I am going away on a long and arduous journey. I may not be back for a long time. I have decided to lead a life of fakiri, renunciation and ascetic austerities. You may not hear from me for a long time, but if I should write you to come to me, you should immediately join me wherever I am. Baramji was taken aback because he wished to accompany Merwan wherever he was going. Disappointed but influenced by what Merwan had revealed to him about spirituality, Baramji promised. That same night, Merwan boarded a train. He had bought a ticket to Raichur, to the south of India, but the echo of the song, the divine voice within, compelled him to get off the train at the remote village of Kedgaon, just 30 miles from Pune. There he inquired as to the whereabouts of Narayan Maharaj's ashram and walked the 7 miles from the railway station to the Sadguru's headquarters. Merwan crossed a small stream and entered the grounds through a large gate, passing by the temple dedicated to Dattatreya. He inquired, where is Narayan Maharaj? He is at his palace, a caretaker replied. Darshan is being held. Go. Narayan is giving his blessings. A large crowd was in the palace, and Narayan Maharaj, wearing a gold crown, was seated on his gadi, lounge seat. Upon seeing Merwan, Narayan immediately stopped the darshan and had his devotees disperse. He came down from his seat and, taking Merwan by the hand, gently led him up a few steps and motioned for him to sit upon his gadi. Narayan removed the flower garland from his own shoulders, placed it around Merwan's neck, and called for mango juice, which was given to Merwan to drink. Merwan and Narayan then talked together for a while, although what they conversed about is not known. Narayan Maharaj then granted Merwan permission to leave. Merwan walked back to the station and, finding a train about to leave, boarded it and was back in Pune in less than 24 hours. Okay, let's have another reader. Rosalie, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Upon seeing him, and is this Baramji, his brother? This Baramji, is that
No, it's his friend. It's his
another
friend.
one? Okay.
Basically his first disciple.
Oh, okay. Upon seeing him, Baramji was surprised, for he had not expected to see his friend again for several months. Age observed Narayan Maharaj's deep love for Merwan, but it wondered. Other Sadgurus had to pass through the fires of hell to gain consciousness of the divine state. The realization of God reduced them to ashes within and without. Yet Merwan does not seem to be suffering the same way. Is it because he himself is beloved God? The 5 perfect masters had drawn a veil over Merwan for 19 years to hide his divine identity and to protect him until the time was right. Then Babajan had lifted the veil. Unlike with other advanced souls, it was not the veil of ignorance that covered Merwan's sight, but only a momentary vidyani veil concealing his true glory.
The veil is comprised of Vidnayani sanskaras that by substance or nature do not bind. Circle members of the avatar and perfect masters also have such Vidnayani sanskaras, but their sanskaras are different in function. The avatar's Vidnayani sanskaras are there performing an individual human identity and as protection, so he may grow and develop into a mature man. The Vidnayani sanskaras of circle members, mandali, have to do with the perfect masters or the avatar's universal work.
Thus, Age knew that Merwan was the one whom he had been longing to see. The beloved for whom humanity had been waiting for hundreds of years. Through his contact with Narayan Maharaj, Merwan was now beginning to feel the glory of his godhood. He was still dazzled by the glorious light and bliss, but now his own light and bliss would begin to dazzle others. Following his contact with Narayan Maharaj, after some days in Pune, Merwan told Baramji, Latus, and Bailey, "Come with me. I am going to meet certain very great saints. They are all holy men who belong to God." Merwan, with his 3 close friends, went to Bombay first. There they met a man called Tipu Baba, who was a God-intoxicated must of a high order, the 6th plane, and was the spiritual charge man of Bombay. After taking...
Let me just read the
go ahead.
footnote. Tipu Baba had inherited his spiritual charge from Baba Abdur or Abdul Rehman, who was a Mohammedan perfect master in Bombay before Merwan was born, and who dropped his body circa 27 December 1916. His tomb is located in Dongri, Bombay.
After taking Tipu Baba's darshan, Merwan and his companions left Bombay the same night for Aurangabad, famous for the Ellora caves and the tombs of many saints. There they met a Majub of the 7th plane named Bane Mian Baba, who was considered a great saint by the local people and who had a close connection with Sai Baba of Shirdi. It was Sai Baba who had given God realization to Bane Mian Baba and stationed him in Aurangabad. Merwan sent Latus and Bailey back to Pune and then took a train to Nagpur with Baramji via a circuitous route to meet the 3rd perfect master of the age, Tajuddin Baba. At Nagpur, they inquired of Tajuddin Baba's whereabouts and were informed that they should take a tonga to the town of Baki Sharif, some 10 miles away, where they would find Tajuddin.
Tajuddin. Taj is a crown. Tajuddin.
Yeah, I like to say Tajuddin. Accordingly, seated in a horse-drawn tonga, they rode to meet Tajuddin Baba, the most renowned living saint in central India. There was a large gathering of devotees around the Sadguru, and all were concerned as Tajuddin was in an ill-tempered, fiery mood. He had been venting his fury on those around him, abusing everyone who came for his darshan that day. When they had arrived at Tajudin's ashram, Merwan and Baramji were informed, "This is not a good day to see Tajudin. The master is in a foul mood. If you enter, be prepared to be rebuked." Merwan, whoops, it's gone.
The text disappeared. And also Marvin. Marvin disappeared.
I don't see Marvin.
Yeah. Mona, you know anything?
Oh, he was he was in a foul mood. He even cut us.
Yeah, they told him not to get close. Yeah. What happened, Marvin? We can't hear you. You're muted, and the text went off, and you went off.
Yeah, my internet went out for a minute, took me out of the whole thing.
Okay.
We thought he was rebuking us.
I didn't think so. I love him. I have a good relationship with him.
Do I have to?
Good.
Do you see the
No,
the
text is not
PDF?
on. No, text not on.
Marvin, you want to share screen?
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, so let's read it from the place. Where's that?
Oh,
Yes, we
here.
can.
Okay.
Yeah, Merwan.
Okay.
Merwan looked.
Merwan looked at the person and then smiled knowingly. "He is waiting for me," Merwan stated. "Tajudin has been waiting for me to arrive." Merwan and Baramji walked through the grounds to where Tajudin Baba was seated. Tajudin, a balding, gray-haired man, was dressed simply. Merwan took the lead as they approached the Katub, who was seated with a few flowers in his lap. To everyone's surprise, Tajudin Baba became silent, stood up, and started walking toward Merwan. Their eyes met and their gaze locked. Who knows what divine inner messages were exchanged? Tajudin presented Merwan with the flowers and rubbed his head affectionately. Wait a minute.
I just want to say to everyone that she's not reading the name right.
Yeah,
Tajudin.
I know you're saying
Tajudin.
that, but it's still, everyone knows what that
Yeah,
name
but
is.
it's also for the people who are not in our group right now and
In
who will be
actual-
listening.
In actual fact, they are equal. Ta'dudin. So there are various ways of saying ta'dudin. In actual fact, there's a comma there and it's didin, but
Tajudin, yeah,
We all
because
say-
it's a Muslim name.
yes, we all say it's
Tajin
actually
and
tajud.
din.
It's recognizable.
We'll know what
That's
it
what it is.
It's the proper noun. It's fine. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Tajudin presented Merwan with the flowers and rubbed his head affectionately, as a father would his son. No words were spoken. There are no words to the divine song. The singer tells the story in the language of song, which only he and those who have heard it can understand. This silent conversation between Merwan and Tajudin Baba was of such awesome depth that Age's heart was overpowered. Age knew that it was witnessing a meeting between the ocean and the sky. Tajudin seemed overcome with happiness as he gazed upon Merwan. Silently, in the stillness of the crowd, Merwan and Baramji slipped away. They went straight back to the train station and boarded the first train back to Pune. None knew what had happened between Tajuddin and the young Irani from Pune. Merwan had received his crown. Upon returning to Pune, Merwan resumed a close association with another of his childhood friends, Khodu, with whom he had attended Pune Camp School. Khodu was then 25, a few years older than Merwan. He was not a particularly clever fellow, but he was a strong man with a powerful physique. Although Khodu was unaware of Merwan's spiritual state, he loved him and considered Merwan to be his only real friend in the world. Khodu affectionately referred to Merwan as his Langoti dust, diaper buddy, meaning a childhood pal or chum. Khodu always acted in an informal manner whenever he was with Merwan, and naturally, Merwan did the same. Once Merwan went to visit Khodu, but he was not at home. Khodu's wife, Naja, asked Merwan to wait, and he requested some food. Naja served Merwan a meal, which he ate ravenously. After eating, he was about to leave when Khodu arrived, and seeing his friend, grabbed him in a welcoming bear hug. Merwan warned him, "Khodu, don't hold me like this. I am no longer that Merwan." Thinking he was joking, Khodu retorted, "If you are not that Merwan, then who the hell are you? I will see who this Merwan is." Being much taller and stronger than Merwan, who was very slender, Khodu thought he would easily overpower his friend and hurl him to the floor, but the result was not what he expected and proved to be one of the greatest lessons of his life. Khodu lunged for Merwan's arm, but Merwan stretched out his hand to prevent him, and with a slight shove sent Khodu reeling back, knocking him to the floor. Khodu was both shocked and amazed by Merwan's strength. Merwan was not angry and good-naturedly helped Khodu to his feet. Both sat down and started talking. Khodu immediately realized that Merwan was no longer an ordinary man, and he began to look upon him with renewed and greater respect. "When I looked into Merwan's eyes," Khodu said later, "I knew I had lost a friend, but I had found a saint." After this incident, Khodu and Merwan, I'll do that again. After this incident, Khodu and Merwan started seeing each other more regularly. Merwan told Khodu about Babajan, and Khodu was deeply impressed, accompanying Merwan whenever he went to see her. Hour upon hour, they would sit by Babajan's side late into the night, returning to Khodu's house as late as 4 o'clock in the morning. Often they would discuss the significance of the Qawwali singing they had heard that night at Babajan's. After a few months, Babajan began repeating to Merwan, "My son, the treasure which you seek and the key to that treasure are not with me. I cannot give it to you. The treasure is yours. It is for you alone. There is no doubt about that, but you must have the key."
Okay, Rosalie, thank you. Michal, would you like to read a bit?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Wow, what a story and how it's well written. Wow. Babajan would always speak about this in a cryptic fashion. Then late one night, did we get to that? The treasure is yours. Okay. No. Then late one night, she spoke in a very clear manner. The treasure is yours to have now. The key is there. Go to Shirdi. There is a Sai, a holy one there. Go see the Sai. See if he will give you the key. One day, Merwan told Khodu, for the past several months, I have had a terrible pain in my stomach, and it won't go away. I don't know what to do about it. Khodu had heard of the miracles surrounding Sai Baba, and remembering what Babajan had recently told Merwan, said, my friend, if you come with me to Sai Baba, perhaps your pain will disappear. I have heard that he has cured every type of affliction. Miracles are an everyday occurrence in Shirdi. Let's go meet this holy man. Merwan agreed, although neither Merwan nor Khodadad knew where Shirdi was. Merwan was insistent they find it. They departed. When they reached the village of Shirdi, they encountered a roadblock of stick-wielding villagers who informed them that Sai Baba was in a foul temper and had stopped giving darshan. When he comes, then everyone is at foul temper. We have come to see Sai Baba, said Khodu. Let us pass. You can't see Sai Baba, the villagers informed them. No one can see him. He has given instructions that no one should come for his darshan today. Go back from where you came. Khodu pleaded. We have come all the way from Pune. We must see Sai Baba. Please understand. The villagers refused to listen to Khodu's pleas, saying, we must obey our master's instructions. We cannot allow anyone to pass. Khodu turned to Merwan and said, it looks like we will have to go back. But Merwan preferred to wait and sat down under a tree. You can go back if you like, he told Khodu, but I have come to see the Sai, and I will. They spent the night under the tree in spite of the warnings of the villagers. It was wintertime, and Khodu shivered in the bitter cold. The next morning, they awakened and had hot tea at a nearby vendor. But there was no word from Sai Baba, and the villagers still refused to let them pass. In the afternoon, word came. Sai Baba is calling you to his mosque, the villagers said. But he is still in a bad mood, they warned. Be careful. Sai Baba was then 77 years old, dressed in a white kafni. He had a white beard and a head of snow-white hair. He was seated in his mosque, Dwarkamai Masjid, and pointing to Khodu said, I want to see that fellow only. Khodu nervously walked up and bowed at Sai Baba's feet. And when he did, the old fakir slapped him on the back so hard that it knocked the breath out of him. Khodu was startled. And then Sai Baba inquired, who is your friend? What does he want? His name is Merwan Shariar Irani. He is very devout and eagerly desires your darshan, Holy One. Hazrat Babajan of Pune has told us about you. No, I won't allow him to come, Sai Baba said. Looking at Khodu, he continued, give me all your money. Khodu did, and then Sai Baba told him to leave. Khodu left and reported to Merwan, who shook his head and said, let us just wait. I must see him, and I will. Later, Sai Baba was on his way to Lendi, answering the call of nature. In a field, followed by a large procession. He's going to. Oh, Baba. Followed by a large procession, which included a band playing music. The atmosphere was joyful, though at the same time solemn with reverence. Contrary to what Khodu had said, Sai Baba now appeared to be in a very good mood. As Sai Baba was about to pass them, Merwan prostrated himself on the ground in front of Sai Baba's feet in Sashtang Namaskar. that's full spread. Seeing Merwan lying before him on the ground, Sai Baba in a deep voice, as if rising from the depths of the ocean, uttered one majestic word, Parvadigar. The ways of the Sadgurus are wonderful indeed, but to the ignorant, they are always unintelligible. Sai Baba's holy word bestowed infinite power upon Merwan. The moment Sai Baba spoke, Merwan became all powerful. Age observed, when Khodu and Merwan had arrived in Shirdi, the air was still. There was no movement in the trees. The sky was gray and the atmosphere was solemn. But when Sai Baba proclaimed Parvadigar, a warm breeze arose and sunlight broke through the clouds. The branches of the trees began swaying as if dancing in the presence of Almighty God and his reflection. Everything in nature and in the universe seemed in sudden harmony, as if affirming, Merwan is God. Those who surrounded Sai Baba were astonished at the sudden change in his mood. When the Lendi procession had started, the master had been severe. Now he was luminous, beaming as if the sun had descended, taken form and stood smiling before him. No one except Sai Baba and Merwan knew the reason why. The message Sai Baba delivered, Merwan alone could understand. After Merwan had risen, he and Khodu slowly walked away. As the proclamation of Parvadigar fell twice from Sai Baba's lips, age bowed to Merwan, the ancient one. But age is ever powerless to sing the praises of Parvadigar unless enabled by him to do so. Age had to wait some years more to reveal Merwan's divine presence among humanity. Merwan felt drawn to visit an old Hindu temple on the outskirts of the village, where they were informed Sai Baba's chief disciple was staying. It was a Khandoba temple where Upasni Maharaj lived. Upasni was seated on its steps, naked and virtually as thin as a skeleton. As Merwan approached, Upasni picked up a stone, stood up, and threw it with all his strength at Merwan, striking him on the forehead exactly on the spot where Babajan had kissed him. The force of that holy blow was so strong it drew blood and left a permanent scar on Merwan's forehead. What sort of strange reception was this? The world will wonder. He whom Sai Baba addressed as Parvadigar had been struck with a rock by Upasni. Yet what is there to be surprised at? Just look at Merwan. With the impact of the blow, his eyes have begun to show more gross consciousness of the world. Merwan had been divinely absorbed in his own godhood and had very little normal consciousness of the world around him since Babajan had kissed him nearly 2 years before. With the wound from this stone thrown by Upasni Maharaj, Merwan's worldly consciousness was to gradually increase and eventually return completely, though the process was to take nearly 7 years. Age noted silently, stone, the grossest form of worldly manifestation, became the medium to bring the God-man back to gross consciousness. After being struck by the stone, Merwan, instead of running away in fright, walked closer to Upasni Maharaj. Upasni took Merwan alone inside the temple inhabited by snakes and scorpions, while Khodu stood some distance away, startled by what he had witnessed. Khodu could not understand why this was happening. He had been bewildered by Sai Baba's words, and now this naked yogi had hit Merwan with a stone. Merwan with Upasni were together inside the temple, but Khodu dared not go near it or interrupt them. He could do nothing but wait. Khodu was particularly concerned about what Memo would say if something happened to Merwan. He was worried that she was going to blame him for taking Merwan to visit Sai Baba. Now Merwan was wounded and bleeding, and if he were seriously hurt, Hodu knew he would have to face Memo's temper. As hour after hour passed and Merwan did not emerge from the temple, Hodu became more and more worried and frightened about his friend. Night came. Shivering in the bitter cold, Hodu waited near the temple. Is Merwan hurt? He wondered. Has his wound stopped bleeding? What is happening in there? Age tried to reassure him. Oh, Hodu, don't you use your intellect. Later you will understand it. Your Langoti Dost has now become your father, and you will have to stay with him and surrender everything at his feet. Merwan has now contacted all 5 perfect masters, and he himself is God. But we are impatient for him to begin his mission and reveal his coming to the world. Another day and night passed, and Hodu grew increasingly anxious. Finally, after 2 days and nights, Merwan came out of the temple in the morning with a pasni at his side. Hodu was greatly relieved to see that Merwan was seemingly well, though he did not know how he was going to explain the deep wound on Merwan's forehead to Memo. They were all shaking for Memo, not from the perfect masters, but for Memo. Upasni said to Hodu, take care of your friend. Make certain you see that he gets back to Pune safely. Hodu had given all his money to Sai Baba and was relieved to find that Merwan had some. When they reached Pune, Hodu took Merwan to his house and had his wound cleaned and bandaged. Then Hodu took Merwan to Bopla house and made some excuse to Memo about Merwan falling and injuring his head. Memo accepted the story that Merwan had hurt his head by accident. However, after some months, she blamed Hodu for Merwan's involvement with Upasni Maharaj and would not tolerate Hodu's presence in her house. So someone take over here?
Sure. Do we have a volunteer?
What about Ray?
I'm not sure if you can hear me. My sound's playing up. Can you hear me?
We
Right
hear
now,
you well.
we can hear you
Oh, well,
good.
it must have fixed itself. Sorry. Settled back in Pune, Mewan continued his regular visits to Babajan, staying by her side for at least 2 or 3 hours a night, every night. Mewan is born. Although Babajan had a mysterious, indirect way of speaking, making cryptic remarks that were confusing to a listener, she would talk to Mewan in a normal manner and once even told him in detail about her early life in Baluchistan. It was also rare for Babajan to allow anyone to touch her person, even to bow at her feet or kiss her hand, yet she would tell Mewan to scratch or massage her back during the hours he was with her. When she would mutter enough, he would stop and depart for home around midnight. By that time, Mewan's fingers were so cramped it would be difficult for him to straighten them. Mewan would lie in bed, but his eyes would remain wide open. He still was not sleeping. By 4 o'clock in the morning, he would be up walking about the house as dawn rose over the city of Pune. He would start melodiously singing the Zoroastrian monajuts, as he had done throughout his childhood. As Mewan was coming down to regain his consciousness, he started eating twice a day and took either tea or coffee in the morning. The quantity of food he consumed, however, was still insufficient to sustain a normal man. Naturally, his mother was quite happy that he had started eating something regularly, though she was concerned about his weight. Once a month, Mewan would travel to Shirdi to meet Sai Baba for a few moments and then stay at Upasni Maharaj at the Khandoba temple for a few days. At times, he would have Peramji accompany him. At other times, Hodu would join him.
Footnote says Jamshed also accompanied Merwan to Shirdi once.
However, he always stayed alone. The birdie just tweeted, it says it's true. However, he always stayed alone with Upasni in the temple. During Merwan's visit, Upasni Maharaj revealed in detail to him about Zoroaster's life, the mission and divinity of the Persian prophet. According to the teachings of Zoroastrian priests, Zoroaster was one of many messengers of God. Upasni explained that the Zoroastrian rites and ceremonies had little to do with Zoroaster's true mission. From the esoteric knowledge passed down by Upasni, Merwan now accepted Zoroaster to be the avatar, the incarnation of God himself in human form. In this respect, Merwan would later repeat this couplet from Kabir. Both Guru and Govind stand before you. To whom should you bow? Bow to the Guru's grace, which has shown you Govind, God. Naturally, when Merwan tried to convey these spiritual truths to his Parsi and Irani friends, relatives, and neighbors, they were taken aback and disturbed by these esoteric concepts of the founder of their religion. The local Zoroastrian priests were particularly disturbed by Merwan's declarations. Although Merwan was beginning to regain a slight semblance of his normal human consciousness, he was able to recognize only his immediate surroundings. The power of the song within motivated him. By the divine will, he moved through life like an automaton, though to strangers he appeared and acted reasonably normal. Finding Merwan more like his old self, Memo pressed him again to find a job. Merwan did not like the idea, however, against his wishes, and because of her pressure, he accepted a clerical position with a well-established brick contractor in Pune. One day, Merwan was seated beside the driver in his employer's automobile. The driver accidentally struck an old woman crossing the street. The contractor, who was seated in the back, told the driver to proceed and not to stop. Since a number of persons recognized the car, the contractor was soon arrested and summoned to court the next day, and Merwan was also summoned. Waiting in the courtroom, the contractor told Merwan, when it comes your turn to testify, deny the incident and claim we were driving elsewhere at the time. Merwan replied, I cannot do that. It would be a lie. When he took the stand, he told the truth. The contractor was worried, but the judge ruled that it had been solely the driver's fault, but fined the contractor a sum of rupees 200 for not reporting the accident. After a few days, Merwan was told by the owner to prepare false invoices, which he refused to do. He became upset at the man's dishonesty and tore up the papers and informed his employer, I cannot work for you anymore. Thus ended this short employment with the brick contractor, and his mother could not object. For a time, Merwan began teaching English to a young Zoroastrian priest named Mobed Sahib at the Khorshed Wadi Fire Temple. They would sit together from 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon and often engage in discussions about religious matters. At first, Merwan refused to accept any payment, but the priest insisted. And within a few months, the priest was able to read and write basic English. After some time wishing only the best for him, Memo pressed Merwan again to find another job, and he was accepted as a school teacher at Nargol village in Gujarat. He was hired to teach 2 subjects, English and Persian, to secondary high school students. His salary was rupees 200 per month, and he would send half of it home to his mother. But his teaching job lasted only a few months. One second. Oops. Bailey described Merwan's time there as follows. For whatever short period he was there, Mewan taught his students with great love and care and won the hearts of all. And no one could match his method of teaching. Keeping the students engrossed and engaged, he was highly praised by all for his dedication to the job. During and after school hours, as was customary, he would always be addressed by the students as Sir. His cleverness, joyous nature, and ever smiling, happy countenance captured the minds and hearts of everyone. He was not only a favorite of the students, but of the other teachers and staff as well. He would also take an active part in all games and sports and would never miss an opportunity to talk on spiritual matters. He would offer advice, gather people in a corner and talk about God in a friendly, amiable manner. Similarly, he would recite his poems or Urdu couplets and regale the students. While leaving Nagal, a large crowd of students came to the railway station and offered him garlands and bouquets in farewell. Even after he ceased to be their teacher, for a long time, the students continued to remain in touch with him through letters and requested him again and again to return.
It was during this period of Merwan's teaching job at Nargo Village that he originated the Divine Theme Chart, which was explained and published 27 years later at a gathering in Mehrabad in 1943.
Upon Mewan's return to Pune, Memo again tried to find some steady employment for her son. She told Bobo, his father, that the sooner Mewan became involved with a steady job, the better he would feel and the sooner his mental distress would be alleviated. His mother would not leave him alone or give him a moment's relief about getting a job. This went on every day, and her pestering was a constant irritation to Mewan. Whenever Mewan would go to Shirdi to visit Upazni Maharaj, he would not tell his mother, or there would be a quarrel between them. He would confide to his maternal aunt Pila Masi, who loved him immensely. When Mewan was a teenager, Memo had a baby, Adi, to look after, and she did not like it if Mewan brought a lot of friends to the house. Pila Masi, on the other hand, loved to have Mewan bring his companions to her home, and they would come and gather on the carpet, play cards or drafts, and narrate stories about Hindu and Muslim perfect masters, saints, and miracles until late in the evening. Pila Masi and her husband Masaji had a large compound around their house where Mewan and his friends often played cricket. It was here where Mewan and his friends had rehearsed their plays also. If Mewan missed coming to her house for even one day, Pila Masi would become worried. Why hasn't Mewan come today? She would wonder. Something must be wrong. Therefore, whenever Mewan would leave Pune for Shirdi, he would inform his aunt where he was going, telling her not to worry and adding that he would see her as soon as he returned. Consequently, only Pila Masi would know of Mewan's whereabouts when he was not in Pune. And when he would return from Shirdi, he would bring prasad for her from Upazni Maharaj. One time, Mewan told his mother he was going to Bombay to visit Jamshed. Instead, he took a bus to Shirdi and stayed with Upazni Maharaj. Memo became suspicious and pestered her sister to tell her where Mewan had gone, really gone, but Pila Masi feigned ignorance. As mentioned, Jal, Mewan's younger brother, acted as a spy for their mother. When Mewan and Jal were boys, Jal would dutifully report in detail to Memo whatever went on at Pila Masi's house. On this occasion, Jal had heard Mewan tell Pila Masi of his plans to go to Shirdi. And it was because of Jal that Memo knew fully well that Mewan was not in Bombay. Memo was upset with her sister for not telling her where Mewan had gone, and she was also upset with Mewan for deceiving her. Upon his return, she scolded Mewan. I'm telling you for the 100th time, Get a job and keep it. Start thinking of the future. Start thinking about earning a livelihood. Start thinking about getting married. Stop stop wasting your life going here and there to saints and holy men. Do you understand me? Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? At this time, we shouldn't laugh. At this time, the First World War was in full force, and Merwan was so annoyed by his mother's constant badgering that he told her, "All right, Mimo, I've decided to join the army. I'm going to fight in the war." So Merwan, hearing this, Mimo became terribly anxious and said, "Oh, no, you are not. You're not going to war. You will stay home here in Pune." For some days, this ploy worked, and Merwan was left in peace. Pilamasi and Masiji had two children, one same son named Aspandia, later named Pendu, oh, and a daughter Naja, oh.
Two other children, Mera and Gustad, had died.
Oh.
I guess they had four.
The entire family became devoted to Merwan, not because he was their relative, but because of his alluring, dynamic personality. Merwan's singing voice, as mentioned, was superb. His sweet songs delighted his family and neighbors, who would look forward to hearing him early each morning. Merwan's voice had a special quality. It was full of feeling. He sang with all his heart. Whoever heard him felt the meaning of the words of the prayers. His voice stirred their spirits, urging them to love God. Bailey wrote, Merwan's voice carried like waves rising out of the ocean, and all things would merge with this sound. When Pilamasi and her family were living nearby, Espandia also recalled, in my childhood, Baba used to sing Persian poems in praise of God very loudly at the crack of dawn. Every morning at 5 a.m., I remember hearing his voice as I was sleeping in my bed. None in the neighborhood would complain about it disturbing their sleep because they liked the song and his voice. And they would say, "Ah, Merwan is singing again." Oh, Merwan is singing. Pila Masi had asked her nephew Merwan to teach her children the Zoroastrian prayers and how to tie the sacred kusti around their waist each morning, which he did, the sacred string.
A kusti is a thick thread that Zoroastrians wrap and knot in a certain manner around their waist. It is sacred in their religion because it symbolically represents tying oneself to God. Its deeper meaning probably has to do with the winding and unwinding of sanskaras.
Espandia and Naja loved cousin Merwan so deeply that once, as a boy, Espandia thought wistfully, how wonderful it would be if Merwan were Zoroaster. Merwan is so loving like him, and he sings such beautiful prayers, and his nature is so kind. I wish he were Zoroaster. Mimo and Pila's brother, Merwan's maternal uncle Rustam Mama, was a big, strapping fellow. He was working in theatre, and he and his wife Parod Jamami had relocated to Calcutta, where there was an active Parsi theatre scene. The couple was childless, and during 1916, Memo sent Merwan to stay with his aunt and uncle for a change of scenery and to improve his disposition. Unfortunately, Merwan was not at ease in Calcutta and felt uncomfortable away from all his friends. One day, however, a prominent theatrical associate of Rustam Mama's, named Havas P. Kateo, 59, met Merwan and felt extremely drawn to him. Kateo was an actor and the owner-director of the Alfred Theatrical Company, which had shifted its base of operations from Bombay to Calcutta some years previous. The company also regularly toured the north of India giving dramatic performances. Mr. Kateo invited Merwan to stay at his home, but Merwan refused. Kavass offered Merwan a job with the company, and Merwan politely told Mr. Kateo, "Sir, I'm not looking for a job." "I will treat you like a son," Kavass replied. "Whatever conditions and wages you want, I will meet. Don't refuse me." Merwan answered, "Please don't press me any further about this." Nevertheless, Kavass persisted. After staying 3 months in Calcutta, Merwan returned to Pune. Meanwhile, Rustam Mama had written his sister Memo about Kateo's interest in Merwan and the job he had offered that Merwan had refused. Consequently, when Merwan arrived home, he was met with a renewed onslaught of lectures from his mother about his future. Memo was convinced that her son was wasting his life. At her insistence, Merwan had no choice but to write to Mr. Kateo and accept the position with his theatrical company. Merwan soon went back to Calcutta. His first assignment was as tour manager to travel with the actors to Lahore in northern India, now Pakistan, where they would be staging a Hindi play, the Ramayana. Merwan could not forget his friends in Pune, however, especially Behramji, with whom he would frequently correspond. In such letter he wrote, "Dear Behramji, circumstances compel me to do things which I do not like to do. I'm obliged to eat all sorts of things that I have no taste for and keep myself dressed in clothes I have no desire to wear. Oh God, what entanglements! What sort of bondage is this?" Strangely enough, though, within a few months after Merwan mailed his letter, Kavass Kateo died in Lahore, 16th August 1916, during an operation for kidney stones, and the company was temporarily disbanded. Merwan happily returned to Pune, and this time his mother could not reprimand him for either quitting or being fired.
Footnote: Rustam Mama and Paroja Mami later moved from Calcutta to Bombay, but Rustam became an actor in the Parsi Theatrical Company and was known as Rustam D. Poonawalla. He also worked as an assistant director for the Imperial Film Company. Okay, we have time for a little more reading. Would somebody else like to read? Shadra or Pia?
Okay.
All right.
Jai Baba. From the initial meetings with Sai Baba and Upasni Maharaj in 1915, Merwan started a grim habit, which was to last the entire 7 years of his coming down to normal consciousness. Every day, Merwan would regularly strike his forehead on the stone floor of his room for hours. Some days in the afternoon, between 1 and 5 o'clock, he would go to the Golibar area of Pune or to the isolated Pataleshwar cave temple. At the Tower of Silence, sitting under a tree, he would continue this gruesome ritual, knocking his forehead on a rock or against a stone wall. He was not merely tapping his head on the stone surface, but pounding and pounding his brow upon it with full force, always inflicting a bloody wound. After knocking his head hour after hour against stone, Merwan would collapse. He would then wipe the blood off his face and clean himself, and tie a large kerchief or a hand towel around his forehead to serve as a bandage and a makeshift turban, thus concealing the wound from his family when he returned home. The local neighbors and his relatives in particular thought that by tying a kerchief around his head, Merwan was complying with some new fashion trend. Little did they know the real reason for wearing the kerchief. Only Merwan's closest friends knew how he spent his mornings and afternoons, but they did not reveal this to Merwan's family, though they themselves did not understand his strange behavior. While in Lahore with the Alfred Theatrical Company, Merwan had also pursued this painful self-inflicted practice. He would manage the company and its performances late in the night. During the day, When the rest of the group was sleeping, he would rise early and quietly slip away to a deserted place where he would bang his forehead against a flagstone for hours. To come down from the highest spiritual state of God consciousness, I am God, to the normal human consciousness, I am man, I am a man, entails unimaginable suffering. The striking of his forehead was somehow a comfort to Mervan during the extreme anguish of his descent from the God state to a normal or worldly consciousness. Mervan himself later described these days of seeming agony. This constant hammering of my head was the only thing that gave me some relief during my real suffering of coming down, which I have repeatedly said is indescribable. The relief I felt by banging my forehead on the stones can be compared to that which a strong cup of tea gives an ordinary man. In actuality, the pain of regaining normal consciousness was so great that only this physical suffering of striking his head methodically could ease it to some extent. Soon after Merwan returned to Pune from Lahore, his father fell ill and had to be hospitalized in Bombay for surgery. Merwan felt obliged to look after Cafe Shahryar in his absence. He would be there the entire day from early morning, handling the cash register and generally overseeing the business. During those days, Merwan's mind was more engaged in writing poetry and ghazals than in concentrating on the restaurant business. Yet he was neither careless nor easily deceived handling its affairs. He simply had no interest in making money. One day, while in the cafe, he composed the following ghazal in Persian, which was later translated: The Face of the Beloved. Now that I have seen the face of the beloved, it has taken control of my heart. Longing has cut my heart into pieces, leaving nothing but the stain of separation. Take the beloved's love as his mercy, or his curly locks as a snare. His remembrance is like a nightingale's longing for the flower's nectar. Though his remembrance has escaped my mind, his face is etched forever on my heart. And when the self is annihilated, duality disappears, and the lover himself becomes God. The lover and the beloved's heart are ever in the same place. The beloved is always in the heart, and the heart is always in the beloved. O apparent renunciant, you make a spectacle of praying, but you ask God to fulfill your desires. Remember, for a real lover, there is nothing to ask, because God does not remain hidden in his heart.
Let's see what that's. The real lover finds God manifesting in the world.
The ways of the Master are peculiar. They make one laugh and weep simultaneously. Outwardly, they appear indifferent, but inwardly, they have love. There is abuse on their lips, but blessings in their heart. Some say the beloved's abode is in the tavern. Some say it is in the mosque. O Huma, what are you searching for outside? Know well that God dwells within your heart. By the time Shahryarji returned from Bombay, Merwan had written several more ghazals along similar themes which he would share with Bobo. In the beginning of 1917, Shahryarji sold his tea shop, borrowed money, and obtained a license to open a toddy shop on Satrapur Street. Merwan started working in his new toddy shop 2 hours a day. He did all sorts of chores to help his father, washing and filling bottles, sweeping the floor, and selling drinks. At times, when a customer became intoxicated from too much to drink, Merwan would sit with him and sing Tukaram's abhangs, devotional songs. The drunkard would merrily join in, clapping his hands and singing along. In this manner, the toddy shop truly became a tavern of song, with Merwan as its keeper, distributing the wine of love to all who came there. A charter
Okay,
transcript.
I think we should stop here. It's only 1 minute left.